All right. Well, cool. Welcome back, everybody, to Energy Bites here with the raddest dads, John Calfan and Bobby Nealon.
What's good?
Today we've got our guest, Bryan McDowell from Sabata.
Yo.
Bobby and I have known Bryan for quite a while now.
Yeah, I was like Urtech in Denver, I think is when I met you. Back
The
in
last
2019.
Not
Yeah.
this past one. But
Yeah, not the last, most recent one, 2019.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah, you were at
Well,
Discover.
then RDS, I think. Yeah, when
Yeah,
I was
we were
at Discovery,
RDS,
so
yeah.
probably going back to
even before
2018?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever
2018,
2019, I think.
Yeah.
That was my last year at
Yeah.
RDS.
I'm glad to have you.
Yeah,
you
I'm
think?
excited.
Brian's had a fun traveling schedule doing his
Yeah.
his log thing, so we'll get into that here in a minute.
100%.
But just jump in, tell us a little bit, about yourself, where you grew up, kind of, what you studied, how you kind of got into the energy space in general, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, sure. So grew up in Brock, Texas, little tiny town west of about 30, 40 minutes west of Fort Worth. Graduated with 38 people, no post office, no football team, nothing like that. Real small. My dad worked on the cement side, working for a centralizer company. Was originally out of Weatherford, and now they're out of Mineral Wells, and then they went international. Did undergrad at A&M for geology. Graduated out a semester early there. Got an internship working for QEP in Oklahoma City. Got into school of mines for grad school. Started in geology masters there. Got screwed on funding, so I kind of pivoted towards an engineering degree. Long story short, I did a double master's in petroleum engineering for a while, and I was working part-time at Cimarex in New Ventures. Finished the master's in 2018 in petroleum. Converted my geology master's to a PhD in, 2014, 2015. And I've been trying to finish that thing ever since. So my usual joke is that I've been 4 months from graduation for 5 years now. But this time I mean it. I've got to finish it now because now my classes are starting to expire.
And you got a dissertation going and everything? Or
What's that?
You got a dissertation working and everything?
Yeah. Well, I've got mines did it now because it's through the geology department. You have to do 3 peer-reviewed articles for PhD. I submitted the first one, and funny enough, it got rejected because they said it wasn't possible, and we started a company off of it. So I'm going to frame that letter.
Yeah, because I was going to say, does starting a company centered around like geology data count?
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of funny. So, but yeah, I just gotta draft. The work is essentially done. I just gotta draft up the writing and defend it. So it's not that big of a deal. But since starting the company and everything, it's been
You're a little busy.
Yeah, just do, Chat GPT, write me a dissertation.
100%. I definitely thought about it for sure.
You gotta. I have to think that's probably one of the most disruptive industries that AI has just completely screwed.
Well, they're already slow to innovate anyways, and it's like.
Well, even when I was in school and stuff, they started rolling out the plagiarism checkers and all of those kind of things and stuff. But now it's
it's original content.
Is it?
Well, what's
That's the
interesting?
fun part.
So my aunt, she works overseas for American schools, and she helps do college entrance stuff, right? And during the summer, she works on admissions applications for universities. And what's really interesting is they're they're up in arms because people are using the Chat GPT platform or service to do their your little essays, hey, this is why my life and blah blah. And I was like, if it's that easy to fool people, then how much value does this really add, right? If you can really make that good of an essay based off of just some random AI that's out there, how much of that actually really matters then, right? I don't know, kind of come from the other side. It's not a very popular opinion, but look,
Well, it's the same concept as, either exalting or discouraging someone when they interview and someone asks them the question and they say they'll Google it or they'll look it up on Stack Overflow. It's well, if in the real world, those tools are available to you. Why wouldn't you leverage them to some extent?
Yeah, I use it to write Python and SQL scripts already, almost every single day now. For $20 a month, it's a no-brainer. Honestly.
Well, are you using GitHub Copilot or no?
No, I'm not that fancy. Yeah.
you need to, do you use VS Code at all or no?
Okay. No, dude, I'm full on blue-collar data science. Essentially, Excel, Spotfire, SQL, Python, and that's about.
Well, I'm saying using Python within like as an IDE.
No, honestly, I do everything through Jupyter Notebooks. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people cringing right now, but whatever.
And I'll expand on. You can use Jupyter Notebooks within VS Code. We should talk some offline.
I don't even know what that is, to be honest.
VS Code is just like a code editor.
It's Microsoft's IDE, but you can use anything in
Python, R, or whatever. But like then, but you can have GitHub Copilot worked into it.
Okay.
And so like you can write a comment, and it will write the code for you.
Huh. Okay.
Or it'll autocomplete as you're writing, say a request, like a GET request, and with the request, it'll basically write out what it thinks you want.
Okay.
Like and use your credentials and all that kind of stuff.
Huh. Okay. Cool.
But I don't want to go too
far
down that rabbit hole, but. That's kind of why we're here, but nonetheless,
for sure.
I want to focus more on what you do well.
And out of everybody that y'all, or at least from what I've seen y'all have had come through here, I'm probably the least data science. I work with a lot of data, but I'm not really a data scientist, right?
Yeah, but I think some of what you're going to talk about is probably the most applicable to who we think our target audience is going to be, though, too. So,
100%.
There's that too.
No, I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this is there's that, citizen data scientists, so to speak, in a lot of oil and gas companies and energy companies, right? Yeah. And so it's just one of those things. It's like we're engineers, we understand data and generally math and stuff, and we like to solve problems. So data and Python end up being where a lot of us go, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into just kind of when you graduated and got into the workforce, kind of what you started off doing and kind of evolved into where you're at today.
Yeah, so because I got the geoengineering background, I've had a really weird work history. I was in grad school forever, right? So I worked a lot of internships. I don't put internships in air quotes here because some of these things is more like full-time work and they just paid me as an intern. Mm-hmm. But worked as a geologist, mostly on the geology side. Done a lot of was mostly exploration and then some development work. Like I specialize like siliciclastic stratigraphy, especially like Western Interior basins. A lot of that Cretaceous stuff you see in like the Pion. I worked the Pions from a PhD, but Pions, Uinta, Powder River Basin, all that kind of. It's all similar stuff. And then the reservoir on my engineering side is mostly reservoir. Did my master's in NMR, which I really haven't used a whole lot since. That was a whole story in itself.
What does that mean for people who don't?
So NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. So it's effectively MRI, right? So MRI, essentially you put your body into this big, huge magnet. They hit you with some other electromagnetic pulses, and then how the signal decays, they make an image out of it. Well, in the oil field, we don't do the imaging process really. We just look at the bulk signal decay, and that gives us an idea of porosity, kind of permeability, the fluids that are in there, saturation, stuff like that. So we did some pretty cool stuff. I actually worked at the chemistry department. So technically I could have gotten an active master's in chemistry actually instead. But yeah, it was an interesting project. I learned a lot. But but that whole time I was doing my double graduate degrees, I was working downtown, did a downtown Denver. So I was at School Mines, worked for QEP for about 6-8 months doing part-time. Always worked the summers doing internships. Did 2 at Devon, 1 at XCO, whatever. I was at Cimarex for almost 2 years, mostly in new ventures and a couple other things. But always flipped back and forth doing geology and engineering. Yeah. Which has been kind of wild because now I've got a pretty big network on both sides, and I forget who I'm talking to half the time. Yeah. So because I can sit here and talk, and I'm a little rusty now since I've been on the service side. Essentially sit here and talk like hardcore sequence stratigraphy with folks. And then 2 seconds later, talk about why someone's pressure transient analysis is crap. Yeah. I forget which room I'm in. So, and then, I just started kind of doing the data stuff along the way because I was always because of that, I always kind of got stuck in a room being the integrator. Well, when you're the integrator, really the translator, really is what it comes down to. Once you translate, then you want to integrate. It's like, oh, well, you need to see it this way or that way. And then just kind of naturally go towards the data side.
Data is that common language almost.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, a lot of stuff like what we're doing now, like pressures and temperatures and, porosity and all that stuff. I mean, there's a lot of shades of gray between the geosciences and especially reservoir engineering to begin with. And so, so data, like you said, is just kind of the natural bridge between everything. Well, so I think it's the common language.
Yeah. When we first met, you had been working on some frac interference stuff that you had been doing, right? And so just talk a little bit about some of that because I know the derivatives of that, and obviously that space has been kind of evolving over the last 5-10 years. But Like,
yeah.
I feel like that was to me, that was like, oh, this guy's a geo, but he actually knows data as well. Like not just geodata, right? It's applicable to the operations and stuff that are going on. So I always thought that was kind of an interesting intro when we first met. I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Like,
so when I was at Cimarex, or I guess they're Coterra now, when I was at Cimarex, I worked in New Ventures. I was just an intern or whatever, but worked a lot of Appalachia stuff, worked Rockies a little bit too. Mostly was kind of doing exploration stuff. I went from there. My old boss, he left Cimarex and went to Discovery Natural Resources in Denver, became I forget his title, it was like VP of exploration or something over there. I eventually left Cimarex. They want to be going a geology role. I want to do more engineering. Followed him over there and kind of rose up the ranks from an intern to a technical, actually, I think the first technical advisor of that company over the next year and a half. So when I kind of going through there, what we really started to do, we worked black oil, some all black oil reservoirs out Reagan County, kind of southeast Midland Basin. Not really crappy rock, but definitely not 60,000 acre acreage either. And so my pitch, and my bosses at the time, who actually works with me still, was like, hey, this isn't the biggest moneymaker here. We're going to have to do this right the first time, right? If you're in like the middle of the Delaware, you can get away with a lot of stuff and you're still going to make money, right? If you're in Great Rock, I'm not going to say it's hard to lose money, but it's a lot more difficult.
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Right. And so part of this is like they were still really early on the development stuff, had a lot of parent wells, were starting infilling, we were starting to get more and more issues. And so I kind of led the charge on, first we were doing reservoir simulation or rate transit analysis, some simple stuff that they had never really done before. And then we kind of moved it into reservoir simulation, and that worked out pretty well. But then it's like, well, we just don't have enough wells for this. We know that there's probably some interference problems, but we don't know why, and we couldn't observe it. We did some tests. We had Reveal Energy came in and did some stuff. They pretty much did a job with everybody back in 2017, 2018. We did one too. And they had some interesting stuff, and I'm very much a fundamentals guy. And so I was just looking at the raw pressures. Like, I think we can pull more out of this than what some of these models are. And so that's what we started. We were already starting to put bottom hole gauges in all of our horizontals because of the rate transient analysis and the reservoir simulation.
Were those real-time bottom hole, or was that?
No, well, I mean,
there's not much of that out there, but I mean, it's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't real time, but we were getting it every day. I mean, so we're acquiring it every 15 minutes, I think, and then we get it pushed out to the databases at the end of every day.
Okay.
So, I mean, good enough for what we were doing.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's as real time as I was thinking.
It wasn't a bomb.
No.
Let me rephrase that for people who don't know.
At the end of a defit, you get a bottom hole gauge, and you've got 30 days worth of data. This was you were getting chunks of it, on a regular basis.
Yeah, on every 24 hours.
It wasn't just to go set the gauge down in the well and record and then pull it back up.
And it was a big push because a lot of time early on, they're like, well, I don't think we really need this because, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, well interference and frac hits was a hugely dirty word.
Yeah.
I honestly think COVID is what really finally people used, I'm probably going to get a lot of angry emails, but COVID, when COVID screwed up everybody's economics, right? Everybody's, right? And so that was when I think a lot of people quietly accepted or quietly said out loud that it was well interference and depletion, all this stuff was like as big an issue as most of us knew it was.
Yeah.
And then we let kind of COVID take the fall for that. And since then, it's kind of come up in the open. Up until that point, I was really like, I feel like a lot of ways it's Chicken Little. And I actually called our database Chicken Little because
that's awesome.
Our management really didn't believe me. He's like, okay, it got to the point where I got pretty strong opinions, but it got to the point, it's like, look, it's like, I think this is real. I'm willing to put my bonus on the table to make predictions on this. And of course, I couldn't get anybody to match me. They thought I was joking. It's like, dude, it's like, I don't care. I've been a poor grad student my entire life.
Yeah,
like, whatever. I'll go put 20, 30 grand on the table for this.
Yeah.
Like, just to prove a point. Because at the end of the day, if we're right about this, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions or billions of dollars.
Yep.
It's a big deal, especially I was young, being technical advisor, like I didn't have a whole lot to lose,
Right.
So, but yeah, it was interesting. So I did all that. COVID hit. We all got laid off, which is fine. And then I started doing some frac kit analysis stuff with Frac Pro, helped them roll out their real-time frac analysis stuff with Frac Pro AI, talk to y'all when y'all are at RDS, right, about kind of getting on board with all that.
Well, you were doing all that in like Spotfire and like SQL or?
Oh, dude, not even SQL. Yeah. I couldn't even spell SQL at that point. Like, to be honest, like I just knew that was something that IT controlled, and it really pissed me off. Like, I mean, There was one pretty spectacular meeting where we were with IT and they didn't want to get this stuff done. I was like, look, guys, I mean, I just got promoted to the technical advisor. I was like, look, guys, I was like, the second I can squeeze a barrel of oil out of a SQL database, then y'all can make the decisions on how to drive this company. He's like, until then, we got to drill holes in rock, and this is what I think we need. Get it done. Like, as IT, and like, I run a data company. We are a service. I'm not the guy out there drilling the freaking holes, right?
And were y'all public or private?
Private.
Yeah. So we're private too, and like, I understand. Like, you get the public companies, you got SOC compliance, and there's certain things, but like
100%.
But like where we're at, I mean, like, it's not the Wild West. We've got some controls, but like at the same time, like, you need to do your job. All right, here's what you need. Here, we'll get it to you. Like, I mean, like, and I hate when there's the red tape. Yeah. You know, like,
I agree. And like,
and all it does is create workarounds.
Yeah.
That's exactly
awful
right.
workarounds.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Because an
like someone's writing SQL on a Spotfire information link instead of doing it against a database.
Hey, in the words of Dr. Ian Malcolm, life will find a way. Engineers will too.
Absolutely.
Right? They will freaking figure out some way to get some sort of Excel or something.
Right. Okay, fine. You don't want to give me a database? I'll throw it in Excel and do it manually.
That's why you just pay for it, man, because like, get that roadblock out, because otherwise your engineers are wasting all their time trying to get around the roadblocks that IT or whoever else is putting up, rather than figuring out how to drill wells, right? I mean, the thing is like, you're spot on with the private thing. The way I look at this, right, as a public company, for the most part, you're selling stock, right? And in order to keep that stock price up, you need to sell oil and gas, right? I mean, it's obviously a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of what it comes down to. Although that has definitely changed.
It's changed a lot recently, but
it's changed since COVID. But pre-COVID, it definitely was that way.
How much oil do you have, and how much are you pumping right now?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so private companies, I mean, you only got a couple business models, right? Do you care about cash flow? Do you care about long-term inventory? Or really it's just cash flow? Or if you're just going to do a build and flip, drill as little as you have to drive up the value and then sell it. We're a cash flow company. I was like, look, it's like, if we need to do the science, like, you know, doing the science up front is the right thing to do. It's expensive. And if you don't have the tech, or you don't have the talent or the time or the money to do it, then don't do it. But, you know, when the way I look at this is like, I don't know, like, if you're in marginal rock, I mean, you don't have a lot of play. Right. You're either going to get it right or you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah, and if you get it wrong and you destroy value, you can't really go back in and get more out of it. Like,
I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is it's you can't unscrew it up.
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I feel like, especially over the last 15, 20 years now, there's been a lot of, I can guarantee you there will be a movement at some point in probably the next 5-10 years of all of these majors, or maybe even independents, going back into the original shale, like the Barnett and the early Eagle Ford, some of the early Haynesville stuff. And they're starting to do this with the refract stuff.
BKV is killing it in the Barnett.
And it's like, oh, we put these really shitty old frac designs with, you know, crosslink and ceramic proppant and not enough proppant. Really big
been killed with oil-based mud. I mean, we were doing this at Conoco. I mean, like and those were when the original frac designs were really original and shit, you know, but like even there was value there, and like you know, at Grayson Mill we're pretty active on the refrac side. I mean, it's ripe for it. I mean, I think it's all those secondary, tertiary recoveries.
Yeah,
like,
and I think when the stakes are higher, you got to do more work, right? I mean, I used to joke that like you can't engineer your way out of bad rock or poor management, right? There's only so you can't do anything, right? But if if you're in marginal rock, like, you don't have a whole lot of chances to get it right. You know, you can go into like this stuff that's way over pressured and got 10 different zones and drill 1 or 2 bad wells, and like, you'll still recover. I mean, you're still going to probably make money on that well. You'll still at least pay out.
Right.
You know, we're out on the edge. There's not as much leeway there. You got to get it. You got to get it right.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and you can't go back and get the data either most of the time.
Oh, dude, and that's the pressure. Yeah, I'm a huge evangelist for pressure. I remember one time
we all are, unfortunately.
They were trying to cut our budget on pressure gauges, and I'd straight up, what the production engineers were, I straight up told them, I was like, I would rather fire some engineers than let go of these gauges. And they laughed. I was like, I'm joking. I was like, I'm not joking. Like, I'll give you a list. You know, it's like we're getting. I was like, we're getting more value out of this. It's $25,000 a pop.
I was gonna say they're not expensive.
It's literally
this is y'all were buying your gauges.
Yeah. It's like it's.
But even like you rent for RDS, it was like $300 a day. We were doing like, I mean, like, that's way cheaper than what you're.
Oh, it's nothing. I mean, I'll always try to put everything in perspective as like what it costs relative to a frac stage. Or I was like, dude, this is like less than one frac stage. I'm going to do that. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, I guess it's really not that much.
Yeah.
No, put it in a percent of the AFE of the well, and it's less than a fraction. It's less than half of a percent. It literally doesn't change the thing. And yet, lots of people are like, oh, that's so, like, I'm not going to spend any more money. I'm like, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to get these stages done.
Yeah.
And you don't want to spend $300 a day just to get some data that is probably going to be valuable the entire life of your well.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that goes to, and this actually kind of trying to dovetail into how I got into the data side of this.
Yeah.
That's really, I think the big thing is because a lot of the pressure data, especially, those data sets are so big, unless you actually know how to handle it, it's just going to sit there.
Yeah.
And that's where I started getting, like, really started boosting my skills on really, like, the spot fire side. Because, like, so for, like, we would design an interference test on all the parent wells going into the job. We would monitor all the parent and all the child wells during the frac job. And we do an interference test on all of the wells after the frac job. Well, so during the frac job, we'll say you have 4 child wells and 4 parent wells. The parent wells were pulling pressure every minute, and the child wells were pulling it every second, right? Takes 2 to 3 weeks for a frac job, or maybe longer. That's a lot of data coming in.
Yeah. I mean, big data is relative, but that's a lot. I mean,
like, it's more than
CSVs,
an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, okay, so, like, I had already been using Spotfire quite a bit at that point. I started on actually using it in QEP, like, way back in 2011. And then was really using it more really when I was at Cimarex, but I really kind of boosted everything with the frac stuff, because then we had to get so much more creative on, like, how to join these tables.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, well spacing. I spent, like, months figuring out a way to do, like, a really good, robust well spacing calculation before Enverus was releasing that as a product and stuff. And actually, we still teach it to this day.
Yeah.
It still works really well.
I mean, a lot of people still want to do it in house. I mean, again, do you want to pay that much? If that's the one thing you need from Enverus.
Yeah. I was like, do you want to pay $20,000 for just a couple one-liners? I mean, you know, anyways.
Well, so let's just talk about kind of how that rolls into what you're doing now at Sabata, and tell us a little bit more about that story. 'Cause I think it's an interesting story. I love what you guys are doing. I think it's really interesting. It also has a lot of applications that we were talking about earlier. So
so when I was at Discovery, I was working, for 2 years of Cimarex and 2 years of Discovery, I was essentially 50-50 between mines and industry, right? I was spending half of my time downtown. The other half of the time I was over at School of Mines. Spring semester, I'd work on engineering masters. Fall semester, I'd work on PhD geology, right? And then that's how essentially I just kept rolling all the time. I did that for years.
Yeah.
Not very efficient, but it was actually, I think it was pretty effective, because, like, now, like, you know, I can kind of move between stuff and I don't really think about it. While I was doing that, I quickly kind of became, like, the Spotfire dude in the grad school. You have to realize, like, grad students are like hermit crabs, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you see new furniture, like, oh, that's a new chair. You abandon your old chair and adopt the new one. Same thing with workflows, right? Like, this is a crappy workflow. Someone's got something shiny over here. I'm going to adopt that workflow, and I'm never going to look at this old workflow again. Well, so early on, I was trying to tell the student or some of the professors, like, hey, we need to bring Spotfire in here. And they're like, well, you know, we've got Aries. It's like, what? Like, I don't think. It's like, I don't think
you didn't understand my question.
I've got a similar story at Conoco where, like, I got pretty good at Spotfire, and then the head boss on the Eagleford development's like, oh, you're good with that. Now you need to learn OFM. I'm like, no, like, no, the OFM data comes to me in Spotfire.
Dude, it's so wild. And so I was doing that. I had all the grad students coming, especially in the geology department, asking me, like, how to use it. And I got kind of tired of, like, answering everybody's questions all the time, because, like, I worked weekends and nights a lot because I was working downtown during the day, and everybody would bug me during the week because they all skied on the weekends, right? And so it's like, you know what? It's like, I'm just going to teach a class. I'm going to do this once a semester, and then y'all don't bug me anymore, or y'all have to buy me lunch or beers or something like that. So that's how the kind of the Spotfire stuff started. Kind of rolled that up, and then I started using that for my PhD work, which is really compiling all of the previously published data in the Piceance and Uinta basins, which is a lot. That's really the birthplace of sequence strat. And so kind of compiling, like, cross sections and stuff, cores, cuttings, well logs, all this that's been combined. Kind of used that in work and just kind of cycled back. Used work skills at school, used school skills at work. Well, then COVID came. We all got clipped. I was sitting around the house. I was like, well, I don't have anything. Well, I had the PhD, but all the schools were screwed up because of COVID.
Right.
I was like, and I was already doing this frac hit stuff. So we kind of went down that road, and that was, I started the company. So I started Sabata Energy Consultants, which was, I'm half Mexican. I wanted something that sounded a little Spanish. And up until that point, I was like really into spaghetti Westerns. So I found this like, the bad guy in all the spaghetti Westerns, Lee Van Cleef. So my first company was a rental house company called LVC Land Co. So he was they called him the best of the bad. So he's the guy with the mustache and the good and bad and the ugly. It's essentially Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's essentially who that movie is about. And so Sabata kind of started from there. Originally it was frac kit stuff. This was April of 2020. And then in August of 2020, I got one of the Frac Pro guys told me like, hey, there's this oil and gas library up for sale in Midland. And I was living in San Angelo at the point. It's like, what? And so I like looked at it was going through like one of the old school like oil and gas clearinghouses. And they didn't really have a reserve on there or something. I was like, well, this is kind of interesting. And I was like, well, I've got this kind of like workflow already for like compiling data from the PhDs. Like, I bet we can kind of do it there. So I called my buddy who's working Midlands. Like, hey, he's like, I don't really know how much this thing is going. Actually, first I called another buddy of mine, David Thule over at Geolumina, who y'all should have on the show.
We were talking to him about.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So we were talking about kind of going in together. And I was like, look, a lot of this stuff is copyrighted. It'd be really hard to monetize it, but like we'll have our own database and we won't have to be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to lease stuff. And so we put in a bid. They said it's too low, and then waited and no one came in else. So we put in another bid. We lost the bid to an outfit in Dallas. Like crap. I was like, whatever, is what it is. Well, then they ended up not going through with it. And so the guys came back to us. I was like, okay. So I cut the bid in half. So I gave them, so I cut it in half and gave them the bid again. And they're like, well, we still want more than that. And like they'd screwed up and told us how much it was costing them per month to store the stuff. Yeah. And I was like, okay, fine. I was like, that's what like, well, we're going to go one of these other libraries, try to donate it. Okay, whatever. I was like, that's all we're going to give you. The library. And the library said, no, we don't want it. We don't have the space. So they came back. So I cut it in half again. and then when they gave it, then we started going through stuff. Some of the title on some of the stuff wasn't as clear as I wanted. It's like, hey, this is the high value stuff. I'm not really sure if you have permission to transfer this to us or not. I need you to go and get explicit permission. Otherwise, we're going to give you half of that one. Yeah. And well, they never could get the explicit permission, so we never acquired it. So we ended up getting like the whole library for less than a quarter of what we put in originally. Wow. So what we ended up getting is it was one of 3 oil and gas libraries in Midland. We bought the Petroleum Research Center. It used to be in the basement of the Claydusta Towers over on the north side of town. I want to say it was like 600,000 well logs on paper, kind of organized, but not really. Another 1 million completion cards. So just on index cards, and scout tickets and some production books and some other stuff. This is December of 2020, right? I mean, or excuse me, 2021? When did COVID happen now?
It started 2020.
Okay, all right. So this is December 2020.
Okay, yeah.
And so me and my buddy bought this thing for a song, and it was in the basement. It's COVID. It's December. There's nothing to do in Midland even during the summer, right? And so we went down in this basement and packed boxes. I'm not joking you, for 5 weeks straight. By the end of it, like we had no fingerprints left, like at all. It looked so weird because there's no internet down there too. So you go in there, we got like this Bluetooth speaker just blaring either metal or like EDM or something like that. And we've just got this big jug of lotion on the side that took up because your hands dry out so bad. And like we'd have people come in like, what is going on in here? Like grab a box, start throwing stuff in. So we packed the whole thing up, moved it out through the elevator. This is the first and last time I'll ever buy a library in a basement. Like, elevators suck. And then we threw it into storage. Like, okay, well now we got to find a building to put this in. During a few months before that, I had helped a couple guys that wanted to do a bunch of helium stuff, like helium data, brought me on board because I worked in 2015. We pulled a well spot database across the U.S. They were kind of doing as a side gig. I was doing this full time. So we ended up buying them out. And then after we bought the library, essentially all the pieces came together. So we pulled the library in, which was the physical data, my PhD work, which is a way to organize all of this stuff, and then the well spot database from the natural gas data group is what we called it when we bought those guys and pulled all the pieces together. And it took a few months to really integrate it all. And that's what really started everything going. So the idea is that we're kind of marketing this as like the Google search for subsurface data. So rather than going to 50 or 60 different websites, you could come to one, which sounds very, very easy. But man, it's been a huge amount of work, like an insane amount of work. I mean,
anyone that knows oil and gas data knows that oil and gas data is never easy.
And so it's like, are you digitizing this data too?
All of everything above. So it's everything. So we've acquired more collections since then. So we got another collection in Kentucky that we got for it's Illinois Basin stuff. We got for CCUS stuff. Got a couple big collections out of Denver from the Denver Library. I'm picking up 50 bankers boxes of well logs here in Houston tomorrow. And then I'm picking up some more in Midland next week. So now I don't even know, honestly, now. And then we had a guy that worked with us for a while too, scrape some data too. So like, I think now we're up to like 1.4 million digital well logs. Wow. That's TIFF and LAS. We've got, I don't even know. I want to say like 800,000, maybe 900,000 paper well logs. We've got another probably 600,000 to 800,000 on microfiche. And we've got completion cards. I don't even know. Probably 1.5 million at this point. I honestly don't know.
So if we want to jump in like more on the tech side, like how are you? I mean, like, are these existing as when we say digitizing? Are those completion cards or stuff like that? Or the paper logs? Are those images now, or are you actually able to pull the data out of that and that's ending up in
it's a mixture. So this is what makes us very, very different than everybody else. If you go to most of these traditional oil and gas libraries or wherever, people are scanning those. They're scanning them and getting them into their system. But here's the thing. 99% of this data will never sell, period.
Yeah.
If you're really good, if you work 40 hours a week doing nothing but scanning well logs, you're probably going to average around one well log every 15 minutes, okay? When you've got 800,000 of them, I mean, that's just to scan it. That's not even to get it on a map, right? Just to scan it into a TIFF format, which no one wants to buy for the most part, right? So we worked. I called up David Thule over at Geolumina. I was like, look, because like I think the better way to do this is we just take photographs of the log headers, because that's really what I really care about anyways. Off the log header, I can get the log description, I can get the API number, the well name, the land grid, top depth, bottom depth, all that stuff, right? And then rather than scanning everything up front, we're just going to photograph these headers, get them onto a map, and then we'll scan them when people want them. And that very, very subtle difference, you're talking about doing, me or the student workers can do maybe 100 or 200 well logs a day scanned, and we can do 500 per person. We call it tagging back now. So what we do now is work with Geolumina. They built us an iPhone app. And we have this little QR code. It's just a unique code that says where it came from, essentially a data source code, the data type code in it, and then just a unique number. We put that little sticker on it. And then with that iPhone app, we just scan that code, take a photograph of the well header. It goes to Geolumina. They process the image, essentially clean it up and crop it, send it back to us. Once we get it back, we got to image that log header and that unique code. And then we go and pull the API number, log description, the county name. So in case it doesn't have an API number, we at least know where it's at. Top depth, bottom depth of the log, whether it's copyrighted or not, that sets the restrictions on what we can do with it. And now we just started pulling temperatures as well.
And you're pulling the data out of the image, like into, are you flattening that into like rectangular data or?
Yeah. Okay. So we're doing, initially we talked to Geolumina about actually automating all this. The problem is like log header stuff is so messy. There's a million different templates. Half the stuff is like handwritten too.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, and we just finally was like, you know what? We just do it all by hand now. So what we do now is we photograph them. It goes to the app. App sends it out to whatever the cloud service at Geolumina. They does the processing. They send it back to us in a Dropbox folder. I pull from that Dropbox folder. We just pull that unique list that got processed, kick it over to our SQL server, which we're just running through an RDS instance on AWS.
So are you running that on SQL server now? Or I know at one point you were using MySQL, right? Or...
Yeah, we're still using MySQL.
Okay, MySQL.
Yeah, that's what we started with, and it's really cheap too.
No, yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing really simple stuff too. I mean, very, very simple stuff. And then that goes in the SQL server, and then I've just got SQL views that say, hey, I want you to pull all of the doc codes. So that's what we call that unique code. Pull all the doc codes for well logs that we haven't done data entry for. And I do that. Right now we're catching up. We're doing kind of county by county. And then I kick that out to a Google Sheet, put it out in a Google Sheet. And then we just have the student workers, me, some of the silent partners. We just go in there and just constantly do data editing. So it's a really simple process. It took us a lot of different ways to figure out why to do it that way.
Yeah.
The first one was the Google Sheets. When we were doing this natural gas stuff, this helium stuff, originally, student workers, a lot of them really great. Some of them don't listen so much. And so what would happen is that we'd have like multiple people work on the same data sheet and we didn't know it. Google Sheet gets away from that because then I can see everybody in there working and we make sure we never do double work. Right. So when doc codes get sent out to our Google Drive, none of that gets edited until it comes back into the system. It's effectively frozen. And that's also a really good way to, one, make sure people are actually working.
Yeah.
And two, it's a really good way to snag errors up front because we're sending out a couple thousand at a time. Like, hey, that's the wrong way to do this. Fix this 100 that you've already done it on and continue it going forward. And then, and then we pull that, put it into the system. We've got other queries that pulls, like if it doesn't have an API number, we pull the well name and stuff like that through a separate query, do all the data entry for that.
Well, don't you have, so there's two questions I've got. One, what do you call it? Dark data? Is that?
Yeah.
So talk about the dark data. And then two, aren't y'all also layering like additional public data on top of the stuff that you guys have as well? So it is truly a one-stop. If I want to find, I don't even know what all data is in it at this point because you've done a bunch of work in the last 6 months. But
so, there's two parts to the data arm of the company, right? We still do a lot of consulting on Spotfire and some Python stuff and little things there. But for the data arm, there's two parts, really business models. The first is this kind of Google search model where you can go to one spot and you can find all the data or pretty much all the data that's available that's out there. We really don't have competition for that. You know, if you look at like the typical IHS and Veris TGS, those are single vendor sites that you only get to see what they own or what they broker, and you have to pay to see it. Right, which is kind of whatever, to each their own. And you also lease that too, right? So whenever you don't pay your bill the next year, you have to delete all of your system. That model worked for a long time. The problem is there's only a few shops that really can afford it now. And what we're seeing is that the oil field is respecializing, I think, since COVID. Now, you've got behind pipe stuff. You've got some of the stuff like the Strawn kicking off on the Eastern Shelf. Like this is not the typical shale company that's just spending money hand over fist. So we've really, I think we're the only real person in this, what we call like a multi-vendor data directory. Just think of it as a phone book. We just went live with it in Texas, where for $250 a year, you can get a listing of everything that we know exists, well logs, drill stem tests, completion cards, whatever. Everything that we know exists in the state of Texas for $250 a year. And the best thing is like you own that table afterwards. So afterwards, you don't want to pay me for next year. That's fine. You get to keep it. But here's the cool part. It's, we've got our stuff in here. We've gone through all the regulatory agencies and the geologic surveys, which is what most of the data vendors don't go through because they can't sell it. And then also going through private companies. So we've got the Mid-Con library out of Edmond, Oklahoma's in there. We're talking with the Wichita Falls library. It looks like they're about to jump on board. We've got, and then on the free version online, there is a free version too, which is unique. We've got Geomark, LAS, NewTek, Premier, you name it, pretty much everybody. So, and then now what we're doing now, you can pay to download it. That's rolling out all the paperwork now. That's really unique. And then what we're really pushing towards now is where we're doing like white label data products. So rather than us bundling up all this data in all these different ways, whether it's leasing, whether it's single sales, whatever, is that we're going to be the guys essentially making the generic toilet paper, and then we'll let everybody else sell that toilet paper and throw their label on it, right? So essentially what we're doing now, if you want to sell well logs on your website, to go scrape all of Texas and get it bundled up, you're looking at, on the low side, probably $250,000 really to get it fully searchable and everything. We've already done it, or we're in the process of doing most of it. So you can come to us and I'll say, hey, this is what I need, a minimum price. You want to slap your label on it, that's fine. You mark it up as however much you want to. I just want a split of the profits and retain ownership. And that has really changed the game for us. And that all came back last fall when I said I was closing the company down. And a lot of the conversations when people were trying to buy us out afterwards. So.
Let's get into that, because I think that's no, I mean, it's the reality of entrepreneurship and small businesses, honestly, right? What, 90+% of small businesses fail. And so it's one of those things that, and there's a number of examples of people kind of in the same situation where it was like they built something and they had basically made the decision to kind of turn it off or back away from it, and then something happened and it immediately started kicking back off. I feel like that's very similar to kind of how
100%. Like we essentially 2020 through early 2022, we were trying to grow. I was trying to grow everything as fast as humanly possible, right? As fast as we could afford. And that went pretty good. I mean, now I would consider us probably for sure top 5 data holders in the US. Like I usually joke, we're the biggest data company you've never heard of, mostly because it's all been on development and we're just kind of getting into production mode. But dude, it came at a cost. Like starting a business sucks. Like it really does. Like honestly, like it's really glamorized on TV. Yeah. But here's the thing: is like I think the oil field's especially bad about this. In Midland too. It's really easy to make $100,000 a year in Midland. Like honestly, like if you could pass this test and show up to work on time most of the time, you can make a 6-figure thing, right? Well, we're building really for the long term, and man, it just got to the point where we're making money, but all the money that's coming in is just going right back into the company. No one was really getting paid or not getting paid that much. I went through divorce. We had a bad business partner that we're still dealing with the legal aftermath of that right now. And it's just like last fall, it's like, dude, this sucks. I'm tired of this. I'm working 80, 100 hours a week. I'm not getting paid. I'm actually paying to work because I'm throwing my own cash into this too. Dealing with a divorce, dealing with a lawsuit, dealing with a bunch of other crap, right? And it's like, I'm done. Like, this is ridiculous. And that was I think October or August, something fall. Like that. And it was really interesting afterwards. So had a lot of people reach out, making sure I was okay and I wasn't going to off myself. Like, no, I'm too vain for that. So, so we kind of like, I just kind of like chilled out and just tried to reset. The thing was like a lot of people thought we were bankrupt. I've heard rumors from some people. And like we still had cash. I was just looking 3, 4, 6 months down the road. It's like, this isn't, we got to stop now.
Tenable,
yeah. What was interesting, so we had a lot of these conversations where people came in and want to buy us out and then want the whole thing for a deal. It's like, dude's like, I'm not desperate. Like, I don't want to sell this.
Right.
The end goal for us was always become an investment shop, right? We use this database and our data skills to eventually use this to let people bring prospects up and invest in them. And so it's interesting when people think you're on your deathbed, you get a lot of deathbed confessions, right? So we learned a lot about like who all was trying to do what in the industry, where they're kind of heading, where they're what they're abandoning and stuff. And the kind of the constant thing I kept hearing too was like people want to sell data, but they just don't have the time, the money, or the skills to really start it. And that's kind of where this whole like white label product kind of started. And that was, and honestly, it was a trip to HEB about 3 months ago when I was buying some yogurt covered pretzels. Right. And so seriously, I was like, I wonder if they make this. Like, no, it's somebody else. Like, oh, that's the model. But what really kind of changed everything is, we had these, we have 2 buildings. We've got a 6,500 square foot office, a 7,000 square foot warehouse. In Midland, Texas, I mean, we bought them for a dime, but still, dude, that gets expensive quick. Our burn rate was just too high. And so
that's the tricky part, right? Is it's not like your traditional data company where you're paying for
physical
cloud
data.
Storage. You're paying for physical storage.
Yeah, we pay for all of it, right?
We've been to the warehouse. It's huge and it's full of data.
Oh, yeah. We've got 70-something pallets of core in there, too, on top of it. Like, you can't scan core and put it on the cloud like it's freaking rock.
Yeah.
I mean, does that have to be temperature controlled, too? Or, I mean,
it should be, but it's not. Yeah. I mean, like, ideally, but like, frankly, no one really does anymore. And honestly, the way we get our cores, operators, and a lot of our logs too, is operators say, hey, we want someone to use this. We don't want to just throw it in the garbage.
Yeah.
And they find someone to come pick it up. I mean, we were effectively glorified garbage men. Yeah. I mean, dude, I've picked up logs. I've got logs stored in 3 different states right now. Yeah. Now what we do is we pick them up and I store them on site. So I've got like a storage unit in Kentucky. I got another one in Denver. Okay. We just store it on site until we need to bring it in.
Yeah.
But honestly, we're going to do the same thing here tomorrow with these Houston logs. They're going to sit in my aunt's place until I'll come for Christmas and haul back to Midland.
Yeah.
And so anyways, so that was all kind of good and well. We learned a lot and was like, I think we can get this thing sold, but it's not, we're not going to break even probably. And, I just not really sure if these people really have the oomph to really pull it over the line. It's a lot harder to do that. Like intellectual property is tough. Yeah. Like, because it's not only like the server fees and having the tech talent, but the attorneys.
Yep.
Attorneys are like my third biggest expense every single month, just for the NDAs, the CAs, the data licensing to people, data licensing from people, right? And that, it all just kind of like took its toll. And then I don't know what happened in December. Like the world just seemed to change. The big one, there's 2 big contracts that came for me. One was my buddy, a buddy of mine who runs Fossil Petroleum out in San Angelo. He essentially goes out and either wildcats little verticals, or he goes finds old verticals that people don't want anymore, buys them, gets them up and running, like this kind of typical thing we've all talked about as engineers, right? And he's like, hey, I got some stuff. I need to spend some money and get off my taxes. He's like, how about I just send you a retainer and you just work off of that? I was like, hell yeah, dude. Like, send it. I get the invoice in like, give me 5 minutes, you know? Yeah. So that was a big one. The other one is I got a big contract with Endeavor Resources for doing spot fire and some Python training. And that was the first one. You know, up until that point, we've never marketed. Everything we've done has been word of mouth. For better or for worse, saves money. Yeah. You know, we get better clients. Or I wouldn't say better clients. We get clients who are actually going to sign the paperwork, right? Rather than just kicking the tires. You're not just
going to like cold, you know, like leads and then trying to figure out if they actually want it or not, or they're just feeling you out.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the deal with them. I was like, hey, I can do this, but like I had been interviewing for some real jobs. Didn't really want to. I didn't really find a whole lot of stuff that really interested me, frankly. And they kind of say, hey, we need the stuff and we need it. We're making a big push to get everybody on Spotfire and get literate in it. And we're trying to book me out through the next year. I was like, yeah, I can do it. It's like, but like, if we do this, we got to really do this, because like, if I take this contract, I won't be able to get a real job. Right. Which definitely came up in a couple interviews. And then after that, it was just back to back to back to back. And like, I've done, today's what, June 21st. I did 48 days of training through the end of May, or through the first week of June, which is wild. I mean, 48 days I've been in front of clients or universities or whatever like that, like teaching on the fly. Yeah. And dude, like that has just been that. I mean, it sucks being on the road that much. I mean, I pretty much live out of hotel rooms, but that's what kept the lights on. And little by little, we just kind of dug ourselves back out of this and got to get cash flow. We got the first data products live now. You know, I'm doing stuff with, hopefully we're talking with Tibco, the people who actually own Spotfire. And a lot of this, honestly, was the Spotfire side. I used to joke, like, I spent 10 years and $250,000 trying to get a PhD just to teach Spotfire classes, you know, but whatever. I mean, it's been pretty good, because I think part of it is that you can hire shops to, like, that know how to push the buttons, right? Yeah. The big thing is, like, I do have a grad degree in engineering and I'm 90% of the way on the geology side.
You've got the domain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like actually how to use it. That's been the big thing. And because a lot of IT people, because that's where you kind of run in with IT, right? IT knows how to push the buttons. They don't necessarily know what to build.
Right. Yep. No, I mean, that's similar to DW, right? It's like you can go hire a marketing company if you wanted to. They probably don't have any industry domain experience or understanding of what the hell we're talking about, who they're selling to, how the industry works, you know, what upstream, midstream, and downstream are, like all those nuances. And it's important.
100%. And I tell people, like, looks like I'm not a data scientist. I don't claim to be. I do a lot of data, you know, analysis and data visualization. But first and foremost, I'm an engineer and I'm a geologist. Yeah. You know, and what I teach in my classes and what I do day to day, you know, a lot of my stuff is kind of hourly work, or we do like office hours, which is actually my favorite way to do this. Or essentially, it's, if you're not used to being in front of, I used to play music and sing a lot during undergrad. Like, if you're not used to being in front of people, it's terrifying. Yeah. But like now, like what I'll do is I'll show up with a laptop and we clear out a conference room for a half day or a day, and we just do it live, you know, just run through all the problems, try to fix as much as we can. And it's great because I block out 3 or 4 hours. We knock out all their stuff. They save a bunch of money because I'm not having to log in, log out, and all that crap, you know. And then we'll come back and do it again once a month or something. Yeah, it's great. I mean, because then you're fixing like real world problems, right? And this is it's been really nice, is like having this consulting and data company together. It definitely makes things complicated at times. Like I can't go do data, I can't lease data from anybody because I'm a competitor, right? That being said, you know, it's really nice when I go into these shops and like, hey, this is how I do it. They're like, okay. I was like, well, this is what I do. Like, and we manage one of the biggest data sets in the business. Yeah. Right. And then we go talk to other folks that we have contractors and stuff that help us out. Like, well, I'm going to do this and that and the other. It's like, yeah, that's great. Your clients don't care about that, man. Right. Yeah. Like at the end of the day, especially since COVID, it's cash flow, right? Like unless it sucks another barrel of oil out or an MCF out of the ground, like it's not going to matter. Yep. And so, you know, what I kind of tell people is like my hierarchy of needs are, does it Does it run fast? And does it look pretty?
Yeah.
I frankly don't care about that last one. I think as you work into some bigger operators or maybe service company, that last one, especially service companies, that last one really matters.
Yeah.
But if you're just trying to get oil out of the ground, does it work? Even if it's inefficient, I get in little spats with the data science guys all the time. Like, well, that's not a really good way to do it. It's like, yeah, but like if it works and people know how to run it, right? Because here's the thing: is like you don't need a Maserati to go to the grocery store, dude. No. Right? I mean, you also don't want to ride a goat, right? So if it's 2 blocks away, maybe you can get away with it. If it's 2 miles away, that sounds really uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I just tell people like if it works for you, it works for you. And I really stole that off of Bob Buree would say this forever for the frac side. Yeah. If it works, like who cares? It's like if you got to get it working first, and then you can make it faster, right? And then after that, looking pretty. But I think most companies, the looking pretty part doesn't matter because by the time you get to that point, you're already on something new.
Well, that and like you're doing this training say with Endeavor or something like, and that's kind of where I've gotten at GME too. Is like let me get this in your hands, and then like if you're doing the teaching part correctly and like helping enable them, you want to provide them the good data and you get it in there, but then let them build out what they need, as they skill up too.
Yeah, right? And the way I look at Sabata, honestly, is I remember reading some article one time where they were taking like this was before COVID, where they were taking like restaurants and turning them into co-working spaces during the day because you only use a restaurant really 4 hours out of the day, or at least the floor, right? And so that's the way I kind of look at it from the consulting perspective. It's like, look, we're consultants first and foremost. That is what pays the bills right now, right? And when people call us and we need to do stuff, then we jump on it as fast as we can. And noted, I can be a little slow on stuff because I try to do too much stuff. But anyways, you jump on that. Well, then in consulting, like January, December, and the summer are always slow because people are on vacation. Mm-hmm. And Mondays and Fridays. It doesn't seem like everybody does meetings on Mondays, and it doesn't really seem that anybody does much on Fridays anymore. And so like Fridays, so like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, those are when we're on deck consulting nonstop, right? Friday through Sunday, Friday through Monday.
Right.
And then in the summer, January, December, that's where we're working on data. Right. And like the idea is that you have 100% utilization at all points, right? Because that's the big thing with these big data shops. They got a lot of data and they'll put out some derivatives, but no one really believes it. Whether we should or not believe it is a whole nother discussion. Yeah. But no one believes it. It doesn't really, the way I look at things is like, the truth only matters in hindsight, right? It doesn't matter if it's real. If no one believes it, people make judgments off emotion. And so, it's a lot easier saying, hey, you're paying me like a lot of money to be an expert in this. These are data sets that I'm building. And let's was it not translational, but like you seeing the quality of work that we do on an engineering and geology perspective or spot fire or whatever like that, we do that same quality of work on the data side too. And the opposite where we sell people data and then we'll do consulting to them. And it's a weird thing, but it works.
It makes sense, right? It's almost like a lead gen type thing, right? You're getting paid for the services. You do it, but then also you build that relation. I mean, it's sales in general. I'm been in sales over about a decade, but sales is very relational based a lot of times, especially in the oil field.
Well, and it comes down to trust too.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
I mean, I was talking to a guy. My story, I came out of teaching, got into oil and gas and into data, and I was talking. But I was talking to a guy yesterday at lunch who he's leaving teaching and coaching and wants to get into it, and he was like, how'd you get from where you were to like where you are now? I'm like, people trust you to deliver. When they ask you something, like you find a way to do it and you can deliver, and they trust that what you're going to provide them is good, and you keep doing that. Like
honesty in the oil field, generally speaking, at least in the long term, genuinely pays off a lot of times. Just being upfront with people, candid, because that's
reliable.
I think that's the craziest thing about the oil field too, is that pretty much everybody you meet isn't worried about if something goes wrong. It's how you react to it going wrong.
Yeah.
It's not, which is like coming out of college, my first job as a field engineer, like shit goes wrong on frac sites all the time. And I'm like, oh God, am I going to get fired for something like, we screened out or whatever. And it's like stuff that's not even related to what I was doing at that time. But it's like, you're always worried about, and it's like, no, the reality of the situation is shit happens. It's not if it happens, it's just when, and it's how you go about handling it when it happens that really makes or breaks kind of your
And as a consultant, right? I mean, your word, your word and your ethic and work ethic and all that other stuff. I mean, that is what seals your fate one way or the other. Yeah. You know, one of my favorite quotes I've said forever is Ernest Hemingway said, like, always follow through what you say you'll do when you're drunk, because it'll teach you to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, that's the thing is I've always said, like, hey, if I want to tell you how to do something, or I'm going to tell you that I'll do something, we'll do it. I might even lose money on it. You know, or if we do bad work or something like that, I tell people, like, call me up. Like, dude, like, I've been chewed out before, man. Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You know, I've also chewed out people too. It's like, hey, you're not doing your job, or not getting paid, which is a whole other diatribe. But, you know, I think, you know, it's a brand, right? Our brand, we're named after spaghetti westerns, right? I mean, our brand is that we're kind of rough and rowdy. We do good work. Occasionally can take some time just because we got a lot going on, but you know, we're going to make it right one way or the other. If we screw up, you know, we'll screw up. You're not going to get charged for it. You'll probably get something back in return or something like that. And that's how I've always run myself. You know, I don't have the most, I have a bit of abrasive personality, I've been told, but that being said, like, I think as consultant, just being like, look, this is it. Like, transparency. You're paying me to fix a problem. This is what I think the solution is. And if I don't not comfortable with it, I'll tell them, like, I don't know how to do. I can get you this far. Let me find someone else to help you out on that. And I think you're right. Like, the transparency part of this is big, and you don't really see the consequences of that really until you're spent on your own. Like, working as a consultant is
when your name's on it. Like,
100%. I mean, it's literally your name on the line. I mean, it has been the startup side has been a huge learning experience, but just being able to, like, it took me 3 years to where we can really start really paying ourselves and all this other stuff, right? And it feels good because then, you know, it's like, okay, I think everybody thinks they know what they're worth until you go hit the street. And I tell you what, the market dictates your hourly rate 100%. Very quickly. You really figure out. We've had some people that work for us too. One guy in particular thought they were worth a lot of money and pulled in essentially no money in it all. And it's like, well, you know, I've got all these skills. Like, yeah, cool. No one's paying for it though. Like, you've got some real cognitive dissonance here, and I've had to go through it too. I mean, you know, we've boosted rates a lot. I mean, you know, and we've also done stuff for damn near free. I mean, you know, like, you just got to build that network up. So it's been interesting for sure. It's been a haul.
I mean, you could do a whole episode on just like consulting, like pricing and everything. I mean, just like, you know, like, because it's just like, then you get the imposter syndrome. Like, no way anyone paid me that much. But then, like, you don't know till you ask, you know, and you don't want to be, you know, just gouging people, but you got to make money. You know, it's like,
there's so much psychology behind that too. But like, I saw something at some point, probably on Instagram, but they were talking about how, you know, luxury brands are mostly recession proof, and it's because their market is recession proof essentially. And it's like, they can charge whatever they want because it's an exclusive, it's not a fixing a need thing, right? And so, like, being able to focus or understand where those markets and psychologies are is a fascinating
that, like, the best clients are oftentimes the ones that are paying you the most. Like, they're the ones that are paying you on time, and they're, you know, generally pleased. And then, like, the person you're cutting a deal half the time, you know, is the one that's like nagging you and just pulling down, like,
and what's interesting is people don't realize how small the service side really is, that world. And especially in consultants, for like, when you're doing this sort of stuff, it is a very small group of individuals. And like, if you screw people over,
shit gets around real quick.
Very quick. I mean, it's usually within a couple weeks, like literally one conference, right? Whatever that next conference is, that's when everybody, like, you know, kind of open kimono a little bit. Right. Cause we're all, like, it looks like we're all doing the same thing, but we're definitely not, right? We're all, like, overlap a little bit, you know? So, like, anyways, it's interesting. So the way I look at this, you know, from the consulting side, or even from the data side, since we're talking about the data stuff too, is like, you've got to figure out, being in a startup and being consultant, all this stuff on your own is really, really, really driven home. Like, what is the good enough solution, and what am I willing to pay for it? Right. Because I'm an engineer geologist, right? Like, I love going down in the weeds and playing and rolling around in the grass and all this other stuff. Right. But the thing at the end of the day, what I usually teach in my classes now is like, look at what your salary and your bonuses are, that however much you make a year, times that by 2, divide that by 2,000, about 2,000 working hours in a year. And it's like, don't look at it as like what you're worth. That's what you cost the company.
Right.
Okay. So take that number, divide it by 2,000. That's what you cost the company every hour of your time. Now take all these little menial tasks or whatever like that, and maybe it only takes 15 minutes a day or 5 minutes a day. And like, that's the number that you have to beat, right? Because it's not even so much, a lot of this is, it's productivity, but it's really expense, right? Yeah. It's like, it makes if you say, hey, this is going to save me 15 minutes a day, it's going to cost us 10 grand, like, oh, well, that doesn't seem worth it. Like, okay, well, it's going to save me 50 minutes a day. That 50 minutes a day costs you 15 grand over the year, right? This thing is 10 grand. It's going to save you it's going to save the company $5,000. That's a totally different conversation. And it's the exact same conversation, right? Like you're actually approaching it with numbers, real numbers.
Yeah. Right? Well, it's also the psychology of loss, right? Like humans are loss aversion all day long versus gain, right?
Well, thinking fast and slow, right? Was it Kahneman? We won the Nobel Prize for it, right? People hate losing twice as much as they love winning. That is a very, and I think as a consultant and everything else too, there's another thing I learned really quickly is it's easier to give too high a price and roll back than like
you never
low
call
ball.
that back.
Yeah, because you never get it back. People don't like prices going up.
Price anchoring is a very real thing. Yeah, everybody, if you don't know what that is, Google it. But the first price that's out there is what everybody will basically start negotiating off of. So if it's higher than what you want, guess what? You might negotiate down to what you want anyway.
And membership has its benefits too. A lot of it, like I've got a handful of clients in Midland and Houston and Denver that have been super loyal to us. They pay fast, they're easy to work with. Dude, we're gonna cut them deals all day long. I was talking to a shop here in town, that we've been collaborating with on the data side for a couple of years, and they need me to do some stuff. It's like, dude, I was like, this is what I charge. Like, I'll do it for 50%. It's essentially just the flight and a little bit of time. It's like, and if that's too much, just let me know. Yeah. Because the other thing too is a lot of this stuff is negotiated. A lot of people don't realize, I probably shouldn't say this, but whatever. A lot of people don't realize, you can negotiate a lot lot the world is not as black and white as you think it is.
Very,
Colin was talking about it when it was on Twitter or something the other day about accounts payable and stuff like that. And just like, hey, can I shift my payment 2 weeks because we need the cash and we're gonna pay you. And then you have to be good for it. But all these, when you pay and what you pay, those are all negotiable.
And those little favors go a long ways. I've got Henry Resources, one of our big clients. I mean, we've been doing work for them in a lot of different capacities for a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. They're awesome. I just go up there, grab my, they call me, hey, I need something. It's like, all right. So I'll work on it that night, grab my little briefcase, go up there tomorrow morning, get it all done. It's like, all right, send you an invoice. They pay within a couple of days. Boom, we're done. I love working with those guys. Yeah. Endeavor's another one. Love working with them. So easy to work with. They always pay on time. And then also, I think when you get that relationship, that's when you can say, hey, I think you're doing it this way. You should really look at doing this.
You get more trust and you can be a little bit
100%. Yeah.
Straightforward.
That's the thing.
Blunt, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you understand the business better at that point.
Yeah. That's exactly right, too. Because the thing is, that's why I love doing in-house courses. They're always more expensive. But the thing with that is it's effectively a 12-hour interview, right? Yeah. Or for me, my course is 6 hours a day. So it's a 12-hour interview to see how I do stuff on the fly. It's also a 12-hour interview for me to kind of see how they do business as well and what their pinch points are and stuff like that, too. And it's good all the way around. We've got a lot of shops. A lot of people just call me just trying to get opinions on where the market is going. I don't really charge for that. There's not really a way to charge for it. But because of that, I try to market us as fixers, right? And we got a finger on the pulse, a lot of things from the data and the consulting side. Is that, okay, well, we can start using that network to kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit.
Provide people value and it'll be returned.
Yeah.
That's literally how Colin built this company.
Yeah. It's tough to pay the bills off of it first, but once you get that kind of reputation and that network and stuff, that's when the opportunities really start coming in. So it's been fun. It's been a haul. Yeah. Trust me.
It's been fun to watch, man.
Dude, 2022 was a shit
happy
show.
For you. Excited. I am excited for the point forward, but I mean,
yeah. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been good. I think we're finally, knock on wood, we're finally really settling in. We feel like it's no longer, I mean, we're still a really small shop, but it feels more like a company rather than a startup. Yeah.
Well, when someone like me can observe it and you can see it building, I see more and more stuff on LinkedIn or wherever, and I see, you're at damn near everything, I feel like. Anyway, but you see more and more other people start talking about it, and it's just this boulder rolling down a mountain. Once getting to the top of that mountain really sucks normally.
And I agree. Like, I've always tried to play the long game, which usually hurts me in the short term. But I think that's really the way to look at it. Like, it takes 2 years to do anything. That's one thing I've learned. Like, contracts, we don't really sign anything for less than 2 years because the first 3 months, nothing really gets done. If you're really good, maybe something comes out in 6 months, and then you have to have a year just to kind of another 6 months to get the word out there, and another year to just kind of observe, because then you have to see the sales cycle too through vacations and everything too, which is something I had no idea about at all on the operator side. So for those of y'all that are trying to strike deals on data stuff, go out there in the summer at the end of the year, and that's when the service companies want to do business, because a lot of times we're just kind of sitting there waiting for people to call us.
Yeah, that's when the deals are made.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. That's where I'm getting all of our data demos right now in full anticipation when people come back from vacation in August. Like, hey, we've been courting you for 3 months on this. Yeah, like it's time to get off the pot. Like, are we going to move forward? It's not. And if you're not, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, just don't waste my time.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is, like, don't take it personally.
Right.
Which is what in the past I definitely have taken stuff personally, which has helped us and hurt us. But I think part of it is just like, if it's in their business model or
I reposted it on LinkedIn yesterday, and it was from one of the really good marketing groups that, of course, I can't remember the name of that I follow, but it was the point of marketing isn't to force someone to buy the product in the moment. It's to keep the product at top of mind when the buying decision does come about. And that is so I could go on a whole rant about that, but we're running out of time.
So they got jingles and everything. I mean, like, again, I need furniture, I'm going to go to Mattress Mac. Yeah, because he saves you money.
No, I mean, it literally is about top of mind, and that's why you have seen like product placement and all of this stuff evolve into marketing over time, because it's like all the Barstool shit. It's like they've got all their sponsors sitting out on the desks, and at every single thing that they do, there is product placement. And some people realize it. Me being in marketing now, I'm over aware of it, and you just see it everywhere. But it's fascinating in this like human psychology that's the entire point, is to keep your company at the top of mind when they when the time comes for that decision to be made.
I 100% agree, and that's why Sabata's based in Midland, buddy. It is not easy running a data company out of Midland, Texas. I mean, because there's only about 3 of us in town that actually work on Python. I mean, not really, but like seriously though. Right, and everybody in the other 2 are making way more money than my dumbass. So, but that being said, we're in Midland. So when people are thinking about data and they're thinking about the Permian, we're the guys. At least it's me and the student workers and whatever like that. Like, we're there, right? So enough that I had to pull my phone number off our website, because that's been like half my day. Yeah, I mean, which is good. I mean, it's good and bad, right? There's got to be a balance in there. But I agree. It's like, that's our little Save the Stripper stickers has been a big one.
I love them.
Right? I mean, that has gotten we've never even, I don't know if you've known this, we've never shown those actually on social media, not once. Those stickers that have gone around.
I'm going to go post it.
Yeah.
When we get off.
Those stickers have gone around all by word of mouth and hand by hand stuff.
That's awesome.
And that's what's, I think, is really, and I've done that purposely to kind of just see how you could do that versus our little LinkedIn post.
It's a network effect.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
It's you're not going to get canceled in Midland for that, but you sure as hell are going to get canceled on LinkedIn.
Yeah, dude. That's very true. Well, and honestly, like,
maybe I'll post that on my burner account.
We've had a couple. Yeah, we've had. I don't know. We've had a couple people get upset about it. I was like, I mean, it's a joke, but frankly, if you
put
get
something edgy like that, you're going to get some people on one side.
Stripper wells very clearly on there.
Yeah,
it's just in different size
pump jack and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
all right, I know Bobby's got to bounce here in a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's jump into the
lightning round, speed round, whatever.
Oh,
go.
All right, so just kind of quick one-word answers. I mean, if you can do that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's hard for me.
What's your favorite cloud provider?
AWS.
Yeah.
What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? Ooh, I just finished Dune. I finally read it. It's awesome. That's my favorite, like, probably fiction. For nonfiction, I really like Ray Dalio's Principles.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been a minute since I read it, but I can tell you that was one thing that really changed how I thought about stuff, to be honest. So,
you got another one?
Yeah. Favorite open source tool, service, product?
Python.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
Just do everything. Yeah.
No, exactly. And honestly, I only use like maybe two blades on that Swiss Army knife.
It's a hammer and a wrench and a,
Oh, I was telling the intern yesterday because I've got this loop that I'm using to run through this Python library. And he was like, you mean you don't have to define the loop? Because it's just for I in this array or whatever. And I was like, well, it depends on which library you're using, like how you want to do it. You cannot define it. You can define it. That's the good and the bad of Python. It's
not opinionated.
It's literally every possible way you could try and do something.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is what's something you could nerd out about? And I know the answer to that. Rocks. And oil and gas.
Rocks, but honestly more it's like where data stored, and like I really, what I think now is like we've got a war map of everything I know that exists in the U.S. and that is something that I would go down the weeds. Like if you're looking for like drill stem tests in Fisher County, like being able like, okay, so there's this, there's that. I know this guy that's got 2 boxes in his garage. I got another guy that's got some in a storage unit in Pennsylvania. Yeah, that's been really fun for me just because like it's essentially gathering intelligence on like where stuff is in the business. That's what I nerd out more often than now. So
wrap it up.
What's the most interesting like bleeding edge tech out there that you're most interested or excited about?
Ooh, honestly, like I've been using ChatGPT a lot. I know that's
it's very popular, but I mean like it's I think it's also important just for every person almost to be, I think it's showing what the inflection point that is.
Well, we're a small shop and I'm not a computer science person like at all. Yeah. And so like just being able to query like little simple stuff and get it to write stuff for me has been a total game changer.
Yeah.
For $20 a month, I mean, that thing saves me easily $1,000, $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
That otherwise I'd have to pay a contractor because I don't have the time to build those scripts.
That's just the time that you're paying them.
Yeah.
Not the time that you're currently
using
would be wasting
to figure it out.
Right?
No, exactly. So I mean, I know that's not like a super sexy answer, but honestly, that's the biggest one for me right now. It's been huge.
So. No, yeah, 100%.
I think Bobby nailed it. Right, it just points to how powerful or step changing of a technology.
And we're 6 months in, really and how ubiquitous that answer has been. Like 6 months in,
I honestly, when I messed around with it the first time, it was like back in April. It's like I've literally called up our partners. It's like, guys, I don't think you really understand. Like this is like. I mean, I don't want to be dramatic, but like that, I really think that is that's going to be a really defining point in humanity in the long run. I mean, it sounds silly.
Could be good or bad too. I mean, there's a lot of positive and negative implications.
Absolutely,
of it,
but that was the first time, and they've been talking about AI and all the stuff happening for decades. Right. That is the first time that everyday people,
the average person got an impact from it.
I was talking to some of these oil and gas libraries where it's all paper. Like they barely know how to use spreadsheets a lot of the times. Right? Not quite that bad, but like seriously, they were going and testing out ChatGPT, and they'd never even heard of Spotfire, Tableau, or Power BI or anything like that. Like that just shows you how deep that penetrated. Like I really think. I mean, I've been joking. It's like we're in the Star Wars era now. Yeah. Like it's just a matter of like having a little robot follow me around. I mean, I guess it's already in my pocket.
Like 90% of the people are probably undershooting it. Like using it don't even know what an API is, and like it's gonna be those API integrations behind the scenes with LLMs and ChatGPT is just gonna it's crazy.
Oh yeah, if you're not, I forgot where I heard this, but I used to say is like if you're not standing on the edge, you're taking up too much space.
Yeah.
Right. And like honestly, I think with the ChatGPT, people can I have to argue with people about data stuff and all this stuff all the time, right? Because everybody wants a perfect solution. There is no perfect solutions out there, right? And just sitting out there and fighting it out on LinkedIn because like, oh, it's got this one flaw. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like honestly, if it solves 90% of your problems and it's like it's boosted my coding speed literally 10x. Like I'm not joking. Like
you're a 10x engineer, right? I mean, like that's what they say.
I mean, quite literally, like,
and it comments for you too. Like, that's the best part about it for me.
Documentation and you even got into where like you can like feed your code base to it and it can document.
It tells me how crappy my code is all the time.
Yeah.
But
you
like I
have
think
it write tests for you, log.
Yeah, and I think that's like to me I really truly think that's gonna be a defining point. In humanity in the long run. Like it sounds so silly, but I really truly do.
I very much so relate it to how I felt when we first started using like AOL and AIM, as well as like Napster and torrents and all of that stuff. Like those were like genuine step changes in civilization, right? Like the internet being adopted across the world was a huge thing that like when you look back at like
the world's so much smaller now.
Right. Well, but you look back
and
at
the
like,
access to information.
The Today Show, like there's a really famous clip of Al Roker and the Today Show host talking, what's an email? How do I send? Like, they're just mocking the shit out of it, and you're like, y'all look really great now for the.
I grew up in a really small town, right? Like, right before I graduated, my uncle bought me a laptop for undergrad for going to A&M, and that was the first time. I graduated in 2007. Like, I didn't even really know what Wi-Fi was then. I remember like going up to they had a Starbucks at the Weatherford, which was like 20 miles away, right? So I went up there and was like, what is this crap? And like got it all connected up, never used Wi-Fi, really didn't even know what it was. And that was 2007. I mean, that's not even 20 years ago.
That's awesome, because you now run a data company.
Yeah, I know.
That's incredible.
Like, it's wild, and it's just, I don't know. It's like the pace of everything is so nuts. And like, I still don't, y'all know a million more software. Every time I talk to each one, y'all tell me these tools, like, I don't know. I hear drool coming out of my mouth. It's like, but it's interesting. I think ChatGPT's changed a lot. It has for us already. And I think the big thing for me, and that's what we're trying to do, is like, that's great and all for digital stuff. But when you go into the physical realm, like what we're doing with paper and microfiche and stuff, buddy, there's like, it's the Stone Ages. There's almost nobody in that space. And that's where we're trying.
Prime for AI to automate.
That's where the good data sets are, right? And the only way to do it is you got to go out there and sling some well logs. And it sucks. And we've done it a lot. But that being said, I'm in decent shape because we move so much paper. Moving paper sucks. So, but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting world. I think that's going to be the dark data side of this is what we're trying to go down. I mean, I think that's really, there's a lot of opportunities there still. We're seeing it. We're just barely looking through the keyhole now. After 3 years, we're barely starting to look through the keyhole and see what's possible. And I think all these other digital tools, it's only just going to get better.
For sure.
So,
Brian.
Well, awesome. Yeah, no, pleasure. We got to have you on again because there's so many other ways we could have gone down.
Sorry, I kind of like wandered.
No, I mean, that's why we had
the idea. But appreciate you coming. Where can people find you both for Sabata and for
So website is just sabata.us. So don't name yourself after a movie because you can't get the .com. So sabata.us. We're also on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So add Sabata Energy Consultants on LinkedIn. And then Brian McDowell just add me on there too. So if you're one of the insurance salesmen, I will not add you back. So just FYI. But
what about your 4K and investment retirement options?
What's that?
I get those too.
Oh,
investment advisors.
I was like, what? It's like, we don't have that. Who told you that?
No.
So LinkedIn is probably the best spot. And then I'm usually at most of the conferences too. So regional conferences for geology and the engineering side too.
Awesome.
So
Beautiful.
Well, hey guys, if you like the show, if you're liking what we're doing, you want to see more of it, please go like and subscribe. Give us a review on your favorite podcast tool. Also follow DW on YouTube.